I am going to be 90 next week. I may not look it, but I am.
Don't brag.
What?
Don't brag.
I can play you a good tune on my fiddle.
You're not kidding.
Senior citizens are still going strong after years of building our country. They have so much to contribute. They've worked hard, raised their families, lived through wars, the Great Depression, and enormous social change. They've seen presidents and congresses come and go. Now, as economic crisis eats up their retirement income, as misguided Republican policies threaten their Social Security and health benefits, they must turn to us, their fellow citizens. Will we take time to listen? I hope so, because the plight of older Americans is our plight. I'm Esther Peterson. I've had the privilege of being an advisor to Presidents Kennedy, Johnson, and Carter on women's, labor, and consumer affairs. During the next half hour, we'll meet the people behind the numbers and headlines, real people hit by inflation and by cutbacks in Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, energy assistance, and employment programs. We'll also hear from the head of the Democratic Party. He'll tell you how you can participate in its campaign to protect older Americans.
And will continue to fight with your help.
Throughout history, all peoples have found some way to join and care for themselves, their young and their aged. During the Depression, Franklin Roosevelt created a system of humane social programs to protect Americans and guide our economic recovery. He did not accomplish this alone. An entire generation shared his hopes and committed themselves to make the system work.
To some generations, much is given. Of other generations, much is expected. This generation of Americans has a rendezvous with destiny.
Refined and improved by Democratic presidents over half a century, the system did work. It provided opportunities for education and employment. It raised health and housing standards. It improved the environment. And it cared for this nation's grandparents. During his campaign, candidate Reagan promised to protect Social Security, but the president betrayed his promises. He revoked a contract built by several generations of Americans. The generation called upon by President Roosevelt contributed to Social Security all their working lives. And now, when they need to collect, budget cuts are undermining their base income, their health care benefits, their jobs, and their basic shelter. Upright citizens depend on these programs. Illness, loss of a job or spouse could strike you or me. If we don't join together to protect our rights, we can expect to suffer separately and silently.
N45.
Reagan's proposed cuts to Social Security would send millions of people below the poverty level. The majority affected are women. Insecurity, isolation, and a marginal existence strike people who are the most vulnerable. We join a group of senior citizens voicing their concern.
I support an elderly sister and with my Social Security check. And if that is taken away from me, I would have to put her on welfare. And I know the poor thing would be heartbroken, and I feel shamed and embarrassed. And I earned that Social Security, and I pay taxes and everything. And I don't see why I can't support her to the end of her days in peace and quiet without having to thrust her on welfare.
I think the government should take care of their people. They've been doing it all the
I
time.
don't think so.
Huh? What'd you say, Connie?
I say the president don't think so.
Oh,
That
no.
The government should take care of it.
I'll tell you, I think we need another president besides the movie star. Because he's for the rich people, and everybody is rich. So we don't need a movie star.
I'd like to see them treat the old people better. Don't kill them. Don't worry about cuts and things like that. Don't worry. Most of these people done work 30 and 40 years in the services and governments and places like that. Don't worry the people about no cuts. That's killing people. That's sending them to the doctors.
Democrats in Congress have always fought hard to build and protect the Social Security system. Here is Charles Minot, chairman of the Democratic National Committee.
When the Republicans tried to gut Social Security last year, Democrats spoke out strongly. We mobilized citizens of all ages, and President Reagan was forced to retreat from his cutbacks. But this battle rages on. Right now on Capitol Hill, Democrats are fighting off new and deeper budget cuts proposed by the Republicans for Medicare, Medicaid, and other critically needed retirement programs. If millions of older Americans, including your own family members, are to be protected, the Democratic Party must be able to count on you now. Please add your name and your voice to our campaign to protect older Americans.
It's sad but true. The Reagan administration now wants to cut vital health programs for the elderly. Here is Claude Pepper, the Democrat who chairs the Select Committee on Aging. He's convening a special hearing designed to save these critical benefits.
Most of these cuts will force the elderly to pay more for health services in doctors' offices, in hospitals, and in their own homes. Many will simply do without medical care. Many of the 3 million low-income elderly who are Medicaid recipients stand to lose access to nursing homes, prescription drugs, eyeglasses, and other services they can't get from Medicare or anywhere else.
Mr. Chairman, this is a time for our nation when it is fashionable to debunk what a democratic government can and should do for its people. It's become a time for lashing out at the programs of the New Deal and the Great Society. But most of these programs work, and they have helped our people.
Come on, Woody.
Florence Sage is a widow and blind in one eye.
Well, I'm 82 years old, and I live all by myself. I've got no relatives. I've got a lot of friends, but I've got no relatives.
Her late husband's benefits were exhausted by his long illness.
He was sick for 5 years, so it took every cent we could get out we had in the bank to keep him going till he died.
All she has is Social Security.
I live on $262 a month, and I want to tell you that's pretty hard going because my heating bill, it runs into a lot of money. It's a heating gas and electricity. That's really, and that's going to be paid. Those bills have to be paid. I can go without eating some days, but I can't go without the heat. I can't go to the grocery store and get eggs and milk and necessities without spending $23 a week. It's impossible. There's some things that you have to have. Got to have soap. I can't wash myself in water without soap.
A senior citizen bus takes Mrs. Sage shopping every week, and she's grateful for the driver's kindness.
The drivers are very good. They take the groceries into the bus, and as soon as we get to your house, they'll take them off the bus, take them right up to your porch.
Unfortunately, President Reagan is not so considerate of the blind.
Now he's going to cut out the talking books of the blind. Although there's a lot of good pleasure in that. Those talking books, I can sit down and enjoy them.
Mrs. Sage could be directly affected by Medicare, Medicaid cutbacks since she needs a risky operation to save her remaining good eye.
This business of things being cut out overnight, I never know where I'm going, what I'm going to do. And the stress is terrible. And I just can't put it into words. My medication runs about $50 a month. But now I've got this operation to stare in my face. I don't know what's going to happen. And if he cuts Medicaid out now, right now, I just can't have this operation, that's all. I'll just have to lose my eye.
Well, we'll call now the first panel. We have a panel of...
Back at the select hearing, Congress listens to direct personal testimony on the harshness of the cuts. The first witness is a lawyer from Chicago's Legal Services.
States, in hurrying to react to the drastic and unprecedented cuts in health care by the federal government, may and have adopted ill-conceived and illegal health benefit reductions. I've received literally hundreds of calls from aged and disabled persons. And the calls range from desperation to disbelief that the state could be so indifferent as to the question of whether they're going to be able to live or die in terms of getting medical care. It's had a disastrous impact. If there's anything that I can emphasize to this committee, it's that these cuts that have occurred are not in terms of superfluous luxuries or non-essential medical care. Individuals have been drastically affected. I've seen countless aged persons that have been suffering needlessly because they can't get medical care.
Before becoming ill in 1974, I had worked since I was 16. Although I do not really understand the policy, my public aid caseworker told me that I would not be giving Medicaid coverage until I have run up $533.40 in medical expenses. I could not believe that this policy was true, and I only receive a Social Security disability check of $340.90 a month, which is my only income. I have to take 36 pills a day for my medical problems. These medicines cost at least $185 every 3 weeks.
How are you, Mrs. Huddle, going to manage if they cut any further your benefits? When you tell us in your testimony, I believe it was you who mentioned what your Social Security check was.
If they took away my, if I can't afford my hypertension medication, there's no doubt that I would have a stroke.
Talk about national priorities. Just unbelievable, isn't it, where our hearts are in this country. Mrs. Hayes, how will you manage?
Well, you rob Peter to pay Paul, and you wonder when you're going to be able to pay Peter back, and it's the way it goes on. But my rent alone is $200. Then I pay my own heat, my own light, my own telephone.
After you do all that, how much money do you have left each month?
For food, about $33.
For the whole month, about
That's
$1
right.
a day then?
That's right.
Mm-hmm. And if you have your health benefits cut further, what would you have to sacrifice? What you eat, or what would you do?
Well, I don't know. You have to have a place to live, and you have to have something to eat. So I really don't know. I'd hate to think of it. I really would.
So we're talking about survival here, aren't we?
That's right. That's right.
The Reagan administration proposes a series of cuts that smack less of coherent health care policy than of David Stockman cutting and running. There should be no mistake about what Mr. Stockman and the Office of Management and Budget are about. If they have their way with Congress this year, in 5 years, the Medicare program will be cut by at least 20%. And just imagine, Mr. Chairman, cutting the benefits for those two ladies that testified earlier by 20% more. It's nonsense to talk about safety nets for the elderly when they are being asked to carry so much of the burden of bolstering our economy, holding our deficits down, and strengthening our defense establishment, while the rich get richer and wealth gets more concentrated in our society.
In a troubled economy, seniors cannot satisfy even basic human needs. For example, heat and utility prices have skyrocketed. Senior citizens, the disabled, and others who live on reduced incomes are the worst victims of higher energy prices. Heating bills in the winter and cooling bills in the summer often run higher than any other costs in a senior citizen's budget. In the winter, when it's coldest and fuel bills are at their highest, some people will be spending half their income on heat. Think about it. That doesn't leave a lot for medical bills, rent, or food.
Certainly the heating bill has gone way up.
My mother lives on a very small Social Security check, I think around $200 a month. And her heating bill runs at this time around $160 a month.
It's frustrating trying to decide upon eating and heating. What is it, robbing Peter to pay Paul?
It seems pretty tragic when heat in this country becomes a luxury.
After they've paid their bills, there's not money for food. And so I've known of them who would take potato peels, for instance, and make soup for a meal, and that's all they have. What does that do? That leaves them very weak, and they're susceptible to all kinds of diseases. They have rags, newspapers, and things to stuff in windows. They attempt to keep warm by this.
Reagan's policies are leaving old people out in the cold in more ways than one. Despite rising fuel costs, President Reagan has deeply cut the program giving energy assistance to the elderly. Growing old in America used to be accepted without worry or alarm, but that's not true today. Now people in their 40s and 50s are worried about their future. People like you and me are waking up to a harsh reality, Republican politics, a mean-spirited brand of politics which is attempting to overthrow 50 years of bipartisan commitment to older Americans. That's why the Democratic Party has created the Campaign to Protect Older Americans. Today I'm asking for your help. You and I simply can't afford to let destructive Republican policies continue. You and I must make sure the people governing America sit up and pay attention to urgent needs of older Americans and their families. Some older people still can work and want to work. Reagan is urging people to help themselves, but he's planning to abolish the Senior Community Service Job Program, which employs senior citizens.
I was 54 at the time. I was only able to secure one job of any importance, and the reason that I couldn't get anything else was principally my age. I was forced to dispose of everything I had. And finally it came down to the day where I couldn't even raise the money to pay the room rent at the YMCA. And I had to walk into a public assistance office. And I couldn't, even while I was walking in, I couldn't believe it was happening to me. And when that day came, and I was standing there looking at myself in the mirror, I couldn't believe it. And when I had to walk in and ask for public assistance, it was like the end of the world. But the job of senior aid opened the door for me. I am a regular employee now. I mean, you got something to do. You have a responsibility. I was no longer on public assistance. I was earning what I was getting. You get paid every 2 weeks. I was my own man again.
Unfortunately, President Reagan has proposed to eliminate the senior aid program, and Mr. Reagan's economic plan has yet to provide more jobs. In a time of deepening recession, cutbacks of senior citizens programs can affect citizens of all ages. Families must assume the responsibility of caring for aged parents. A middle-class income is being stretched to the breaking point. The McGrady's, a 3-generational family in Damascus, Maryland, attempt to cope with this problem.
They're everything in the world to me. We have always been together.
Edith Beam is 92 years old, a stroke victim. She lives with her daughter and grandchildren.
But I never slept with one of the children because they always done what I told them. They knew I meant exactly what I said. My father was a Baptist preacher, and we was taught that way, to live as near at home as possible as we was at church.
Elsie McGrady supports her mother, her 70-year-old brother, and her 3 children on a secretary's salary.
She would like to be at home, and so would I like for her to be, but she has to work.
It's a matter of juggling. Every penny that we all get here in this house goes together to pay the bills. And that's the only way that we can survive.
It seems like we never have enough money to do anything that everyone else in the neighborhood wants to do. And go different places, and like we've always wanted to go, like my brother, he always wanted to go to King's Dominion.
The McGrady's rent their home. When they grow up, the children hope that they can help out.
I always say I'm going to give them the money that I make give to my mom and help her with the house so she can buy stuff.
Of course, the first thing is the electric bill. After I pay the rent, the first thing I try to pay is the electric.
With high rent, heat, and medical bills, Elsie has trouble making ends meet. The only way to get by is by pooling resources. She told us that the checks her mother and brother receive in Social Security wouldn't even pay for their food. The kids help out with household chores, and their uncle prepares the meals.
You want some lunch now, or do you want to go lay down for a little nap, and I'll fix your lunch when you wake up?
Take the lunch later.
The family receives help from the Family Demonstration Program for support of elderly in the home. Reagan wants families to take over, but federal budget cuts may eliminate the program that makes this possible.
Continues to rise, and if they were to cut that out, then we would just, I don't know, we'd just really be hurting terribly.
But I do hope that the president will realize that seniors have to eat as well as those that are rich.
Are people going to just stand by and accept these cuts? Or will they speak up?
Presidents we had, and I've never seen such a time. In all the presidents that we had, not as bad as this one.
The women are really going to be on the short end. Women who have been housewives all their lives and have been the partner in earning the living of the husband, they are going to be really in a disastrous situation.
I feel sorry for some of these elderly citizens that really have been hurt by the losses of all these different types of monies that are supposedly going to be taken away by our good President Reagan.
Any one of these cuts would be punishment enough. Taken together, these proposals constitute a kind of Chinese water torture, drop after drop, until the overall burden becomes too much for the elderly to bear.
Reagan doesn't mean to be mean. He doesn't mean to be, but he just is.
Really a bitter man would do a thing like that. He has to realize that we are so many of us that are in need of the little help we get, and we should continue getting it.
I wonder whether it's constitutional, because it is a contract.
You see, Reagan is an actor, and he's always been an actor, and he always will be. He lets these other people do his work for him, and he wants to strut around and be the big shot. And he doesn't know what's going on, and he doesn't care. He doesn't take the trouble to investigate either.
So we'll find out if a lot of seniors will get together and hold hands and strike.
It's shocking to me that this TV program had to be made at all. It's shocking because hardly anyone can understand why the Republicans are turning their backs on millions of older Americans, senior citizens who faithfully supported our government and worked so hard to build our nation. But under the Republicans, we see that tragic and shoddy mistreatment of older Americans is real, painfully real. You've seen the faces of despair and felt the sense of outrage. You've heard the voices of fear and frustration. You now know why so many older Americans feel betrayed and disowned by their government. And I hope now you see exactly why the Democratic Party's campaign to protect older Americans is so important to all of us. I urge you to join our campaign today. I share the anger of people you've seen on this program who are outraged by the Republicans' shocking lack of compassion and commitment to serve all of the people of this nation. For many older Americans, the political fate of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid is nothing less than a matter of life or death. Many are already forced to choose between food and medicine. Democrats have always fought for older Americans and will continue to fight with your help.